Hey everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on AI-driven transformation from a traditional to an algorithmic business. I'm joined by Shaun, Ian, and Somil here, and we're going to give it a go for 45 minutes now. I'd like to hear you all, who you are, so please introduce yourselves, beginning with Shaun.
Hi everyone, Shaun McGirr. I'm AI Evangelist at Dataiku.
Excellent. Ian?
Hi, my name's Ian Macdonald. I'm Principal Technologist with Pyramid Analytics.
Excellent. Somil?
Yeah, and hi, my name is Somil Gupta. I'm an AI strategy and monetization advisor at Intakt AI.
Excellent. All right. So this is interesting, algorithmic business. I think that's maybe a word that one could say has been coined in recent years, at least, if not this year. So I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks that really means. What does it mean to be an algorithmic business? Are all businesses algorithmic business or software businesses, as some people would say? Let's begin with you, Shaun. What's your take on it?
I think if you take the broadest definition of an algorithm, which is a set of rules for transforming some data inputs into some data outputs, I think most businesses, even if they are not AI transformed or AI ready, are algorithmic businesses in some sense. But I think the difference surely has to do with the complexity and scale of those algorithms and how much we are delegating to those to take decisions.
Right. So does that mean that all businesses are potentially algorithmic businesses, or what do you think?
Potentially, yeah. I think
even the analog ones, or is it ones that are doing digital transformations?
I do like the phrase analog business. Sometimes
I'm thinking like
divide
a tattoo
businesses
studio,
into those
you know?
that are companies born before and after the birth of the internet. You know,
Right.
It tells you a lot about how they go about data and transformation. But I think the potential is there, and anyone who's using and collecting data, which is almost anyone running a process today.
Right. All right. How about you, Ian? What's your take on it?
I would tend to agree with that statement. I mean, everybody who makes decisions is going to apply some kind of algorithmic process to doing that. I think what an algorithmic business would do would be to apply a more formal process to that in terms of the data that you're working with and using that explicitly in terms of supporting those decision-making activities, and to some degree automating those as well. But that kind of depends on where in the organization, at what strategic level those decisions are going to be made.
All right, and Somil, you also, I'm pretty sure you have a lot to say on this. What's your take on it?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, algorithmic business. So the precursor to algorithmic business, I'd say what you used to call the last cool term was systemic business. So all businesses are based on systems. I think what has changed with algorithms is that one is the context that you have about the environment that you're operating it, and second is a time scale. So systemic business are about setting up rules. So for example, Toyota Way is a set of rules that defines the philosophy on which the business operates. But I think algorithmic business is just going to make it shorter, dynamic, and I think you have maybe a new Toyota Way every month. So you are more reactive. You are more responsive towards the environment. You can anticipate the changes, and when you want to move as fast as you want and adapt as fast as you want, then it's not possible to do the execution in the manual way or in the analog way, so to say. And that is where you need a different set of capabilities in the execution system, in the decision making, in the way we set up incentives. I think that is what I would say is the crux of the algorithmic business, in my view.
I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, and I think some people are wary of words like algorithmic business and other words that have a sort of a hype tinge to them. You know, you'll find people that'll say, we've been doing data analysis for 20 years. I used to be in data warehousing and this and that. How would you say algorithmic businesses really differentiate themselves from what some may say they've been doing for 20 years or whatnot? What do you say, Shaun?
I think the answer was kind of seated in what both Ian and Somil said. The big change would be when you meet those people who have been doing something with data for a long time, they often can't explain that train of thought about what both Ian and Somil were talking about, how the data that they have been providing connects to anything, connects to decisions or actions. And I think that can be jarring for them when they see that the perfect data warehouse and then data lake and now data lakehouse that they've built. When someone comes in and says, well, what's the value of that and why aren't you an algorithmic business yet? They have that sort of allergic reaction. But I think that's the difference between providing data maybe out of context or just because people were asking for it and tying it explicitly to the kind of change in organizational decision making that Ian and Somil were talking about.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of companies have the capability to do very advanced analysis. I know when I used to work at a large blue chip company, I was involved in the sales of a very large data warehouse, one of the first such sales to an e-tailer here in Sweden. And yet, when they give me food recommendations, they don't know that I haven't bought meat for 2 years. They still give me, cheese and samples and stuff like that. And I feel like that's something that they should have learned in the past 2 years, given their tremendous compute ability. What would you say, Ian, is stopping companies that evidently have the technical prerequisites to make these kinds of, predictions about what customers might want or what would benefit their business, but don't seem really to be able to capitalize on it?
I think it comes down to a lot of ways is to how sophisticated you are in your approach and what kind of latency you have with the data that you're working with. One of the things that continually frustrates me is that I may have a business trip to Malmo, let's say, and I'm going to fly into Copenhagen and take the train up. And then for the next 3 weeks, I'm bombarded with ads for flights to Copenhagen. And I'm thinking, well, I've done it now. It's too late. So you see a lot of some rather kind of simplistic approach, I think, to the data that's being captured, and then applying that and thinking, well, you've looked for one flight to Copenhagen, so you must be looking for another one in the next couple of weeks. And that's almost always not the case. So I think there is you need a little bit more sophistication and a little bit more understanding of the data, and also looking at not just what that user has done in the past couple of days, but what has been their activity, what's been their behavioral profile over the previous couple of years, if you have the data that goes back that far. So I think it's a little bit of naivety where they're not actually thinking through exactly how people behave based upon their immediate recording of their throughput through your systems, and being a little bit more sophisticated in understanding the behavior patterns and using that to create more accurate predictions. I think that's part of the limitation that I see in a lot of sort of automation of those business processes and automation of the marketing and promotion of products and services. It's a little bit behind the curve, if you like, in terms of what people are actually doing.
Somil, do you
add something to
yeah.
I'd like to add something to what Ian said. So I think I like the way what he said about the latency. And see, here's the thing: the information that is coming right now, we are not prioritizing that information. But if you see, for example, in finance, when we do the modeling of risk, for example, there are concepts like exponential decay. So the information that I got 1 day before has probably more value than what I got 1 month before. But somehow we do not have the framework to consider that. And the second part is that, see, you might be doing analytics for 100 years. The question is, how frequently are you applying it? If you're applying it for if a time scale is 1 year or 1 quarter or 1 month, then you are more or less in the analog business. But if you are doing your changes, for example, in price every day, or every week, or maybe every hour, then you are in the algorithmic stage. I think that is how I would like to differentiate. Is a time scale of application, and the second is whether you are anticipating or you're reacting. If you are algorithmic truly, then you would be able to anticipate the change and respond to it in a very graceful way, rather than trying to bounce around all over the place and then finally come to a price, which is what is happening more or less today.
I tend to agree, and Ian, I agree, especially with the idea that I think the algorithms are unsophisticated and perhaps not up to modern par. So I'd like to get all of your feedback a little bit on whose responsibility it falls on by way of an anecdote. I know in logistics, a service that a lot of companies wish to provide is same-day delivery, in contrast with, using data to plan delivery routes and other forms of service, which would have been sort of a classic or well-established incumbent kind of data analysis. And a more dynamic version would be something that would allow you to do same-day delivery just 30 minutes before you're going to be sending out your trucks. The question is, what function in an organization does it befall to ponder that as a service and then sort of figure out what the technical prerequisites are for making such a thing happen? Because I don't think you can use old techniques to create that kind of new service. So, Shaun, what do you think? Is it really dependent on techniques, and whose responsibility is it to invent these new services and improved services?
I think the techniques to improve that flight booking example have existed for a long time. But if you think about even Amazon, right? Amazon on their own website still recommend that you buy the thing that you bought and has been delivered by Amazon to you, the unique customer identified. You do everything through your account, and it's still, do you want to buy another one of those books that you already have? So if Amazon struggle with it from a technical point of view, it's probably not a technical problem. It's probably more to do with something with the business. I don't know who should own it in a business, but I would have a strong intuition that it should not be the data people who answer those first principles questions that you raised. That might be contentious at a data conference to say that there are things data people can't do, but
I think it's totally unreasonable. I mean, don't you see that people go to data scientists and say, you need to come up with a business case before we'll listen to you and think that data analysis is even useful?
Or you're smart people, you'll figure it out. Yeah. And if somehow you unicorns pull a unicorn out of your unicorn hat, then we'll implement your recommendations. So I think the organizations we see making that kind of transformation are getting the business owner of the pain to think more digitally and algorithmically, maybe, and then through that reaching out to pull on the right data capability that they need. I spend a lot of time as a data scientist and data leader trying to push that uphill, and it just rolls back right over here.
Well, Ian, to your point of, maybe people using unsophisticated or, just ancient techniques, I think some people now are trying to educate themselves in the forms of these online courses in deep learning. I don't necessarily know that, it's important for a decision maker to know exactly how the backward propagation of errors works in order to actually be creative when it comes to this stuff. Like, what kind of education do you really think is necessary for people to start to, be creative with the algorithmic business transformations?
Obviously, I think people want to look at data science and machine learning or data mining or whatever term you call it over the last 30 odd years. That there's a degree of science to it, but there's also a degree of art to it as well. Being able to select the right algorithm to look at for the results that you're looking for is part of that art. That requires a reasonably deep understanding of the mechanisms and processes that underlie that particular algorithm. It also means that I need to prepare the data in a way that's going to suit and have that algorithm create predictions or whatever it might be with reasonable accuracy. But coming back to your previous question as well, it's interesting, I think, that as time goes by, we're going to see this stuff being if you like, farmed out to specialist services. And coming back again to that kind of Amazon example, most, in terms of getting all of the products and the packages together for a particular shipment, that's kind of obviously going to be Amazon's responsibility, and they're going to want to group those together based upon a particular distribution area. Most of the actual delivery drivers, though, are contractors. They have their own vehicles, and they basically get a consignment, and here's a list of stuff, and I need to be able to deliver it to these multiple drop points. In that situation, I think we're going to see an evolution of sort of third-party services, where those individual contractors are going to say, here's my route, here's my area, here's my drop points, give me the most efficient route between these items, bearing in mind I may have to double back if someone's not in, etc. So we'll see, I think, a degree of specialization and a degree of sort of third-party solutions, and particularly today, with cloud services, etc., that makes it pretty easy. I, as a contract multi-drop delivery driver, can sign up for those services, and obviously I'm going to choose the one that's going to give me the best route for the shortest amount of time for the maximum amount of drop points, etc. This allows me to finish my work early or get a bonus because I deliver quickly or whatever it might be. So I think we're going to see that kind of segmentation and division of those particular specializations of particular type of algorithmic processes, and those are going to become available effectively as plug and play services for those particular users.
Right. When the services have become established enough to be sort of disseminated widely.
And to be profitable.
Right.
Yeah, this is what drives everything at the end of the day. I think also in terms of where in the organization and where in the whole kind of business process these algorithms get applied. At the moment, from my observations, that is very much in that kind of almost the final, the bottom level decision making processes, which I'm making in close to real time. I think what we're going to see over and if you could run your business algorithmically, people would have done it 20 years ago, because many of the algorithms we use today are pretty much the same as they were then. Obviously, the difference is we have more data, we have to do it quicker, and the actual kind of velocity of that stuff is that much increased. But what I see, in terms of becoming a true algorithmic business, is when you start to push that higher in the food chain in terms of the decision-making process itself. I think Gartner recently, in their trends for 2021, were talking about decision intelligence engineering and platforms, rather than analytics and business intelligence. It's about encompassing the actual decision-making process, applying those algorithms at a particular point in that process, and pushing that to the different levels of decision-making process you have in the organization.
Yeah. Somil, I mean, do you think also that that this is equally applicable to small businesses as large businesses? I see sort of a hesitation from a lot of small businesses that say that there's not enough scale to warrant sort of an algorithmic approach to things. I mean, especially if we're, I'll be the devil's advocate in just a moment, because I'm not sure that it's merely data that is something that has changed. I do think that algorithms have changed fundamentally, but a lot of businesses, say that there are technical hindrances, like they don't have enough data, or they don't have an interesting use case in that thing, especially if they're small businesses. Do you see that in the work that you do?
Yes, I work with both small and large businesses, and I think the problem, I'll say the problems are quite similar in that sense. It gets political very quickly, because just to answer your earlier question, who should do it? Well, definitely AI leaders should not do it, but as it turns out, they are getting more and more commercial responsibility. And I believe that AI leaders of today are going to be the organization leaders of tomorrow. So it's not such a bad thing if they start doing it. In fact, my talk this time in Data Innovation Summit is on commercial value stream, how to enable the AI leaders to be more commercially. But when you say someone not doing because they do not have data, I think it's a bad excuse. And reason for that is the way AI and data has been kind of, the way the propaganda has been that, we will unlock the data that you have. But if you see most of the leaders today, whether it's Facebook or Google or Amazon, they did not go with the old data. They always went out collecting new data, because they would launch a product, and the purpose of the product was to collect more data, and then use this data to launch more products. So they have a process to do that. Right? So I do not buy that excuse that we do not have data, hence we will not do it. Because, and if you are a smaller company, you have all the more incentive because you are already more agile. How else would you compete with a large player? So if a large player could have their same price for 1 year, and if I could change my price every week, then I could definitely take a lot of these peak shaving, so I can take some part of the demand when the off-peak demands, or where the big companies are too slow to respond to. So if you're a small company, then I think you should be more proactive in being algorithmic, because you have more to gain with. Large companies, they have a problem. They cannot move as fast, but you can move fast.
I'm going to
It'll rely
paraphrase.
on
Matters.
it'll rely on the services Ian was talking about, maybe becoming commoditized to that level where they can be taken advantage of. Because I think if that small business now looks out at the landscape and Googles, how do I do this, or asks some people, they're going to get a lot of messages, and it will be very confusing, and they'll think it's not really for us, and we don't have the scale to do it. If those big giants can't do it as well, what's my business? So I think the future for the small businesses is probably picking and choosing amongst the AI-enabled services that help them get a job done. And ideally, AI for them will not be a big part of the marketing that makes them buy that service or subscribe to that decision service, if you like.
Right. I'm gonna paraphrase Somil here with something that I really liked, which is the idea that AI leaders need to get business savvy as opposed to business leaders need to learn how AI stuff works. Because I do agree with you a lot, Ian, that the more you understand about the principles, the better equipped you are to make good decisions. And I do think, I guess there is sort of a sweet spot somewhere, because I do think people nowadays, for instance, are very familiar with the principles of the internet, even though they might not understand how, name resolution and that kind of stuff works. They can still come up with products that build on the principles of the internet. And I imagine people will be able to do similar things with AI in the future. But I guess one question is, I'm gonna say, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, but I do think that deep learning is something that has really played an important role in the algorithm business, in the sense that it can do things that we haven't been able to do before. And there are many reasons to believe that it has nothing to do with GPU's amount of data or anything. For example, we have many of the most exciting new models now act on graphs and are one-shot learners. So they train by learning from synthetic data that's generated on its own. So Shaun, I mean, is deep learning central in your opinion to this algorithmic business, or is algorithmic business just a speed thing?
I think it's mostly a speed and scale thing, and it goes back to the problem that you're trying to solve. A couple of years ago, a lot of my data science training is quite traditional, you could say. And a couple of years ago, I got very concerned that I didn't understand enough about how deep learning worked. So I took Andrew Ng's Coursera course, and I discovered it's linear and logistic regressions stacked on top of each other. And what makes it possible is the computing that's available, and that opens up all these other things. And so I think there is a qualitative shift in what's possible. I think, picking up on what you said about these one-shot models, it would be amazing if we could help practitioners, companies, organizations of any size take advantage of those as their starting points. I think there's still some people out there who say, we want to build a cat's recognition algorithm. Let's do it from scratch because we'll do the best one. And, I was talking to a customer the other week who needs to understand the quality of the raw ingredients they're purchasing. That's their biggest cost lever that they can pull. And they took a generic image detection algorithm from one of the cloud services and kind of augmented it, and that got them what they needed, 3 years faster than if they'd started themselves. So it's unlocked tremendous possibilities, but those who have unlocked it, I think the biggest gift they can give is the head start to value.
Right. I think it's curious that you gave the cat example. What we see is a lot of people, when they think about AI, they think about it in very visceral terms. It's applied to text, it's applied to things, to images and that kind of thing. But it seems to me like the greatest potential is to apply it to abstract things, business processes, relations, graphs, and that kind of thing. Ian, do you feel that, even if they don't know what AI is capable of, do you feel that business leaders are equipped to formulate the problem to begin with in those abstract terms?
In my experience, generally, no. And I think come back to that in terms of as data scientists and being able to be familiar and work well with the algorithms. I think they also, as in most sort of traditional analytic techniques and business intelligence over the last 30 years, when I go into an organization and talk, actually the people that have the best understanding of the business across a set of particular processes are often the IT folk. because they have to interface with every part of the business and every part of that program and every part of that supply chain, if you like, understand what those individuals need from an input to an output point of view, and actually understand the overall business process probably better than any individual business person responsible for a particular line management role. And so I don't think it's beholden to business leaders to be able to understand this stuff well. I think it's back to the more traditional technical approach of before I actually start thinking about what type of algorithm to use for this particular problem I want to solve, I really need to understand the business underneath that. And in my experience, that tends to be the best results that people get.
That's super fascinating, and something that I've been thinking about a lot, sort of the dependency graph of various business processes that typically, a business owner might not be privy to, given that they focus on their particular business unit. And like you said, maybe only an IT person or somebody might ever have a full picture by force of having to implement it as an IT system. Somil, I mean, do you see people with the ability to implement the either algorithmic business thinking or AI to abstract use cases, or is it all pictures and text?
I always deal with, I'm calling abstract, but I'll just call it like business problems, the real world business problems. Because see, identifying cat, I'd say, is not the goal that we have. Most companies, that's not the goal that they want to achieve, right? It's a demonstration of a capability. And I really kind of agree with what Ian said. What we lack today is, let's look at any other function that you have. Let's say procurement or sales. You have three different layers. You have a strategy layer, you have a tactical layer, and then you have operational layer. Data and AI today, the problem is that we have a strategy layer where someone says, okay, we want something, which is not very well defined. And then we have operational layer where we have people who are building that. What we need is a tactical layer, which is the domain of formulation of the problem, which is the domain of risk assessment, risk management, domain of decision intelligence, domain of setting policies and incentives. That is what is like. I don't think it's the same person who needs to do the business formulation and the same person needs to also do the design. It doesn't happen anywhere in any organization, anywhere in the world. It's always different set of people. But what you need is a single set of definition and a process to do that in a way. So,
but you mean that because there's not all the competence in one place, or because you mean from a sort of organizational perspective, it makes more sense to do things that way?
See, if I would expect a data scientist to do what they do best, which is come up with cool algorithms to solve a particular problem, formulating the problem. Because see, it's not just about formulating. It's not about just solving the problem. Today, I might have a problem. Let's say to do. Let's say I want to optimize same-day delivery, for example, right? But tomorrow the problem might change. Once I deploy that algorithm, I learn from it and I say, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do this same-day delivery to all my customers. It's too expensive for me. I only want to do it for this set of customers and not for that set of customers. So business strategy is not static. It's evolving. You need a set of people who can also deploy, test, monitor the algorithm, and come up with new strategies, and then give it back to the scientists, and then they build new solutions to new problems. It's an ongoing process. So you have.
So go on.
Sorry, it's a full-time job for the commercial people to do it.
And I think it also, again, we tend to talk about data science and algorithms if it's all one thing, and coming back to that decision-making process and the decision relationships, there's also, when I see at the moment, most of the kind of AI and algorithmic-driven pieces are in that sort of operational area. We talked about, the routing for my delivery drivers. You talk about, when I'm on a website, it's a recommendation engine of some sort. This is the stuff which is going sort of at a very, in a matter of minutes or seconds, I'm wanting to make those decisions. When you go further up the food chain, when you're looking at operational, tactical, and strategic level decisions, as Somil was saying, there's maybe a different type of AI, a different type of machine learning you're doing, because you're looking there at a more complex environment. If I'm looking at an acquisitions and I'm looking across different opportunities or mergers or whatever it might be, then that's going to be a different type of analysis, and it could be the more traditional type of analysis, but then I may want to bring in those kind of deep learning things as well, and looking at past acquisitions and how they've behaved and how that's panned out for different companies. And that's an entirely different approach, an entirely different set of problems than the one I'm facing of, how do I recommend the next book to someone to buy on Amazon? It's an entirely different scale, and it's an entirely different time scale as well. And so there's you need to look at what are data scientists good at? Are they good at those types of algorithms with more qualitative data, or really very heavy quantitative data as well? And so I think it's horses for courses. If I'm good at doing a particular activity in terms of advising and managing those strategic decisions, or is what I'm good at doing and the algorithms I'm good at using at the more operational level? And there's a big difference, I think, between those and the skills and the experience needed.
I'd like to pivot a little bit sideways, because there are two types of algorithms in my experience that one can, or let's say, algorithmic approaches that one can have to sort of transforming one's business. One is, especially for businesses that have been doing analytics for a long time, you can take new techniques and make them marginally better. If we circle back to the routing example, maybe you can use a newer algorithm to find a shorter route, or a newer algorithm to plan something better. Alternatively, you can use these new algorithms to offer entirely new services that weren't possible before. And the question is, which one has the lowest hurdle for companies that are wanting to get started in this and, develop centers of excellence and start experimenting with this kind of stuff? Shaun, what's your experience? Which one has the lowest threshold or barrier to entry?
I'll do a pitch for my talk at this very conference where I say that some of the lowest hanging fruit has already fallen on the ground and been consumed already by existing business processes. And I think what we see sometimes is that people looking to get more value from data, they go after the easy stuff, they go after the lower barrier things, and then they get stuck. So sometimes we do talk to people who've been quite successful in the digital part of their business, say digital marketing, and they know how much impact they could have at that tactical and strategic level that Ian and Somil were just talking about, but they get stuck there. And so I think that the conventional wisdom of, it's not that quick wins are wrong, but quick wins are quick for a reason. And you have to think about the next steps. That's all I would say about yeah.
I think in what I see that those are the ones where I already have the data, and you're talking about electronic commerce, for example. I mean, that I know that I'm going to generate good quality data. I'm not going to have data that's missing. I'm not going to have data which has been manually input, maybe incorrectly. Most of it is auto-generated, and I've got a good, clean data set that I can immediately apply those algorithms to. I think, for the other types of problems, the main foundation in order to get to that data, that digital transformation, is trust in the underlying data. And that I have that data available to me and in a form that I can use it effectively in terms of those algorithmic processes. Without that, you're dead in the water. And I think those low-hanging fruit that Shaun's talking about are those ones where I don't have to expend too much effort to organize and shape the data in a way that I can actually get some results out of it. There's an old joke, I think, is that data scientists spend 80% of their time preparing data and 20% of their time complaining about preparing data. So, and that's the main job, it turns out. And I think to bring that type of, if you like, chores and drudgery work, if that can be more streamlined, made easier, then that makes the whole algorithmic business that much easier to achieve as well.
Let me give you a follow-up question. Both of you, Ian and Shaun and Somil can answer. Is just, do we not risk sort of marginalizing the benefits of data science and algorithmic thinking if we only go for the small stuff? Because I see people often saying, yeah, we did it and it gave a little benefit, maybe. Who cares?
I can give you a very good framework for thinking about this. Economics, we have marginal utility and marginal cost. The two options that you gave, what I would like to do is understand where I have most marginal value. If I take that action, where do I get the most benefit? But at the same time, what is the least expensive to implement? yeah, I do have mature data, but if I have to run the whole MDM program to get the data out and do the entire and to do the metadata, is it really going to cost? Because it might look like low-hanging fruit, but you don't know whether the fruit is really sweet or is it how good that fruit is.
Oh, it's gone rotten already.
Yes, so got rotten already. You won't believe the kind of the cases I have seen where companies have been struggling for 2 years trying to fix a problem, which is best solved by circumventing it. Don't do it. Abandon it. But it becomes a slippery slope. So marginal utility, understand, estimate, and that's what we do. When we go in, we understand what is the opportunity size of this, and then we do complete analysis. And what is going to cost it? What is going to cost me to build this up? Everything end to end. That business case, you need to figure it out. If you do not have that in a use case pipeline, you might be chasing the wrong tree.
And I think also is that don't necessarily expect that solving any one particular problem is going to give you a 50% increase in your bottom line. I mean, it's probably not going to. It reminds me of the GB cycling team. I think when they had their massive success at the London Olympics, and talking to their coaches and their management team there, they said it was about very, very small incremental improvements, but in every single part of that process. And so what that did, when you look at that in an individual thing in terms of, I don't know, wind resistance or whatever, if you get a 0.02% better profile, that's not going to win you the race. But when you add that to the 10 or 20 other things where you've created a 0.02% process, you end up with a larger percentage where it's actually going to make a difference in terms of beating the opposition. And I think to get to the true algorithmic business, that's more of an attitude to take rather than I've got this fantastic new algorithm that's going to solve this particular problem and give us a 50% increase in bottom line. It's about adopting it as a fundamental and pervasive strategy rather than a one-off.
That requires a lot of maturity on part of the decision makers, I think. And when it comes to sort of who to look up to, both for decision makers and data scientists, I suppose my next question will sort of betray how you guys view your own companies, whether you see yourselves as incumbents or up-and-comers, sort of disruptors. But the question is, if we're going to be looking for examples of best practice, both business management-wise and technology-wise, where do you guys think we should be turning to? Should we be turning to the Googles and Microsofts, or should we be turning to, boutique companies and smaller startups? Shaun, what do you say?
Oh, okay, I was going to wait for someone else to take that. Okay.
Yeah. So what's Dataiku? Are you guys disruptors?
We occupy a niche that is a very interesting niche, and on a technical basis, our niche is about giving people the freedom to answer that question that you asked, how they choose, right? So very few people we talk to now are only on one cloud. They used to be on-prem looking to go to cloud. Now it's I'm on one, but I also want to be on another. Okay, so we want to make that possible and obviously not compete with the clouds, but then also to bring in expertise where it's relevant. So on the people side, we're much more about scaling the people impact, and I think getting more business and process owner eyes on the problem, on the ideas, on the data, on the solution is sort of our bet, if you like, on the great untapped opportunity there.
So, but you guys are a bit thought leaders. I mean, do you see that customers should be, you have a very specific approach to data management and how to, experiment with algorithms, just concepts like data democratization. It's not clear to me that incumbent companies think that that's necessary. I mean, I know there are a lot of words that everybody is sort of rallying around, but it's not necessarily clear which one of the companies, what types of companies to sort of follow the lead from when it comes to algorithmic transformation, the kind of thing we're talking about today. Who should we be looking to? Should we be looking
Ian,
to the
Ian,
incumbents?
you answer it.
Yeah, okay. I was going to draw the analogy. You know, when you look at government IT projects, they almost invariably overrun, don't deliver what they said they were going to. If they ever get operational, that's great. But you see countless examples where billions of pounds of dollars are spent, and then the whole thing is thrown away. And when you look at the type of organizations that provide those things, typically those are contracted out to very large systems integrators and things who actually have the, in quotes, the experience and scale to do it. But what I see is that actually the better brains, the A team, if you like, are typically not in those big organizations. They're in the more boutique consulting people who focus and specialize in those particular types of problems to solve. And I think also, when you look at across, you always fall back into when I first started in the software business, it was, nobody got fired for buying IBM. And now, nobody gets fired for buying Microsoft or going with Google Cloud or whatever it might be. And the temptation is for those organizations. So while I have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft. They've got a machine learning tool. Yeah, they've got some business analytics and intelligence. I'll use that because it's part of the suite. It comes in quotes free, although that never is. And it must be good enough. And sometimes it will be good enough, maybe, but it's not necessarily going to give you that competitive edge. If everybody's using the same platform, everyone's using the same tools, they're all going to be suffering from the same deficiencies of those. And I think it's worthwhile for whatever size of organization to actually look around the market and say, well, who really are the specialists in this stuff? Who actually is looking at this full time, not just as a small department within some behemoth organization. And so I think there, from that point of view, and our particular approach to this is looking at it from not just purely a algorithmic or a data science thing by itself, but in cohort with my whole, data wrangling, data preparation, with the business intelligence and analytics space, and the visualization, and then also the data science and the algorithmic processes we put in place there. And I think we refer back to what Gartner were talking about is decision intelligence, is that it seems to be a confluence of those three particular disciplines, and being able to provide an environment where it's not just half a dozen products just sort of pushed together in terms of creating a solution. It's actually integrated from the ground up to address those particular issues. And I think that's where, certainly from a pyramid analytics point of view, that's where we see the market going, and that's what our platform is designed to address.
All right, Somil, I'll let you have the last word here. What do you say?
I'll answer it in a different way. See, a lot of companies, when they say what's your vision is, they say we want to be an AI company, we want to be a data company, we want to be a services company. But most likely you will just be the company that you already are, probably faster and better, right?
Which would be amazing.
That is what should be, because you have a value proposition, you have a positioning in the market, customers trust you because you have something which is unique. You have your own USP. You need to make that visible. You need to make that more accessible. You need to make that more agile and more adaptive and better, right? I would say if you are not in the Amazon in the e-commerce business, you can only learn so much from Amazon. See, the algorithmic business, the most important thing is how you are formulating the problem and what strategies you're deriving from that, right? It doesn't matter. Yes, I would use this Amazon supply chain strategy if it suits me. I might use Facebook's marketing strategy if it suits me, but ultimately it has to come together as my strategy. Because if it does not come as my strategy, I'm going to have a Frankenstein's monster that doesn't, it just scares people, right? So it doesn't matter who you look forward to, ensure whatever concepts you pick and choose. Let's say you take revenue management from the airline industry, hospitality industry, right? When you integrate it, it has to work for you, for your company. And that's what, and I'm not at risk. So that's what I help companies do. Doesn't matter where you decide to take it from. Ultimately, it has to work for you, for your unique business model, for your unique business identity. So I think algorithmic business is going to be different from anyone. And algorithmic business is just a platform, a new platform for people to compete on. It's not something which is going to change the nature of the business. It's going to change the nature of the competition.
Excellent. I think that was a great way to wrap up this panel discussion. I'm glad to have had you all on the panel. Thank you for joining me, and to everybody, we'll see you at the next session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.